Ollie, today we are going to talk about some of the metrics. Obviously, metrics are a key part of both of our sort of remits within Strategic. Obviously, my focus will be on data. I will be bringing metrics to the forefront of SEO, keeping an eye on some of the important metrics around impressions, click-through rate, and some of the more on-site ones. So I think we'll just want to talk around metrics and our likes of metrics, ones we don't like so much, but then also some of the opportunities around building better metrics. So I'm going to start off with probably, what's your favourite metric?
Well, obviously as an SEO, we're sort of pretty tuned to sort of pay attention to organic sessions and clicks from Google Search Console. But again, you'll see it liberally shared on sort of social media platforms of the successes of that acquisition, effectively getting them onto the site. But I don't feel like a lot of attention is paid to how they actually engage with the site. There's obviously a few that you'll assess. Obviously, my role is predominantly sort of content with that sort of SEO hat on, effectively. And you want to see how users are engaging with it on the page itself. Do they have a good time on page? Are they bouncing?
Yep.
But I think it all boils down to, is it a good experience? If they've come away with a valuable piece of advice they can make a more informed decision on, then that's a success. If they've been on a site on that page for 10 seconds or a minute. So yeah, back to your original question, I'd say sessions and clicks.
Don't really have a favourite metric, just as long as it's a good experience for the user.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think for me, being very much focused on conversion and user experience, I sometimes like to try and go a little bit further in traditional conversion rates. So traditionally a conversion rate is calculated based on the number of sessions and then the number of goal completions that you're referring to. I sometimes like to go a little bit higher than that, go up to the user. Mm-hmm. It's not as good as it used to be, but it kind of gives you an idea of how good you are at converting your overall audience rather than just how many times it needs someone to come to the site to make that conversion. So that's where I like to start going above and beyond the metrics which are available to us as a sort of standard analytics user or standard search console provider, a user.
So is that sort of utilising events more effectively and understanding those sort of micro interactions on the
Yes, it is having those micro, you obviously want to have those micro interactions in place and tracked, but looking at users as being those sort of unique cookies onto a website and then using your event-based goals to understand what percentage of that overall user base are converting.
Or taking a positive action.
Yeah, taking a positive action, or sort of, converting is taking a positive action, making a transaction, completing a form, sign up for a newsletter, etc. I think that's probably where I sit with one of my favourite metrics.
Yep.
Well, your least favourite one's a bit of a
leading question.
Contentious issue.
Yeah. So I've never been particularly warm to the idea of domain authority. I get the concept, obviously, as an SEO, but equally, you've got to look at it beyond the site. Yeah. You obviously need to be trusted and enough of an authority on that topic to give yourself the opportunity to rank by demonstrating that relevance. But as an SEO team, we often see reporting on sort of backlinks as DR ratings of where they've come from, and just assessing the SERP against, okay, who are we up against, who's in higher positions. Oh, they've got a domain rating of 60, we're on 59. Is it attainable, that SERP? But it doesn't boil down to that, in my opinion. It just comes back to, are you adding more value than that next best result? If your content is stronger than a more authoritative site, but like I say, you're adding more value, it's more useful to the user, I think it's a bit of a recurring theme, that, then you should show up above them. And I had a great talk with Dixon Jones, the Majestic and Inlinks guy, and he's done a fascinating report on sort of page rank and sort of looking more on a page basis as opposed to site-wide domain.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges with domain authority, I know it's on to your metric, but domain authority itself, there's not necessarily one standard way of calculating it. Depending on which what your SEO tool is of choice, you'll likely see different ratings, which can obviously lead you down a bit of the wrong path if you're trying to up it on one place and then the other place is saying it's really low. It's a bit of a misdirection around where you actually may be, and where you can use those more page level metrics to give you a better understanding, rather than trying to reach this metric that nobody's 100% sure on what actually constitutes to it, as all of the different algorithms that run in the background, whether it is number of backlinks, average rank, etc. All these different things feeding in that it's not overly clear what's in there. I think that's where my personal frustrations are with domain authority as a sort of a metric for people to strive towards. It's also probably one of the hardest ones to move.
Yeah. It has been the case where that is the metric that, well, one of many metrics that people want to see. They obviously want to see a steady improvement in how trusted you are effectively as a site. But like you say, striving for that, and it might be, and equally like some of these preset reports within your SEO tool of choice, getting up to a 99 or a 100% health score, when in fact these pages are right to be no index, or these pages, there's just reasons why those are flagged as errors, but they're fully aware of that. It might be for an internal purpose, and the sales team might want it, but you don't want it on your site, but you want to be able to link to it. So again, striving for that health score metric, again, isn't a good use of your time necessarily.
Interesting. I think for me, probably the metric that I guess it's almost, just because there's got so many different ways of interpreting it, is average time on site, average session duration. So
that's one that's often confused as well, isn't it?
Yes, average session duration. You can argue someone's spending a long time on your site, they're engaged. But then the other flip side to that is it taking them too long to find what they want to be doing? So that's one of those ones where I'm kind of like, really need some context behind it. But then also it can quite easily be misinterpreted and be measured incorrectly. And so that's one that I have a little bit of a, should we be using that type of metric to understand and gauge performance of a website?
Yeah. I suppose there's also sort of visual analytics software out there that, where you can report on rage clicks and stuff like that. It's just like going around the site, constantly clicking elements and it's not responding how you'd like, then you need to layer that on as well, really.
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest things I can say around metrics is always contextualize it. So I obviously spoke about average session duration. The other one that I often find can be a cause of maybe frustration or a bit of a misunderstanding is bounce rate. So bounce rate traditionally will measure the percentage of people that come to your website and then leave straight away without taking any significant action. Typically people will say, oh, my bounce rate is really high for this page or for a whole website. But the thing they have to realize is that you might be satisfying that user's intent straight away, and that's why your bounce rate's high. And the classic example I've always used is for a school. So every single school will have a term dates page. If someone types in school term dates and comes to your page, that page is going to naturally have a high bounce rate because you're going to serve that user's intent on that page.
You're giving them what they want.
You give them what they want. They're a one and done. They can read it and then they can bounce off. So that's where again, another example of where that context is super key, and without it you can quite easily get yourself, we need to make all these changes to the page when it might actually be doing what you need it to do. Which I guess kind of leads us on to where we're starting to use or are using more enhanced and more developed metrics. I think that's where you were speaking the other day around the content ones.
It's, for me, sort of me and Doug as the copywriter, it's slightly different approaches to this. So I think the natural copywriter route would be to say you want to keep the user guessing, want to take them down the page, not give away too much, not answer the question straight away, and then give them a well-rounded conclusion, sort of writing for, it's just good storytelling, isn't it? Whereas from my side of things, in terms of more of that SEO focus, particularly with the prominence of these featured snippet answer boxes, you just need to give the user the answer straight away, summarize it in, say, 35 words for that paragraph of text, and they, in theory, don't necessarily need to read the rest of the page. That's a win if it's an answer to a question that makes them more informed to come back to the site and perform a positive action, then I'm more than happy to lose that user after 5 or 10 seconds, as long as they've got the answer they need. And that's where it should tie into remarketing and nurture campaigns. So you're maximising that, albeit short visit to your website.
And I think one of the things we were discussing is how we have that better level of tracking for content pieces. So what we were able to do is split our sort of users that view or read a piece of content into 3 main categories. So we have
dwellers, isn't it?
So you've got your skimmers, so someone who will scroll down the page and not spend enough time on there to have read it. Your dwellers, who will, based on sort of your little bit above average reading speed, will have spent enough time on the site to have read it. And then you have the people that have done both. I think that's a really nice way of how you can take your traditional metric, which would be average time on page, scroll depth, and use something like Google Tag Manager to take that up a level. And I think that's a really, really key thing for people to do, is just look at what you have at the moment, understand what are the better metrics to be using for that, so you can better understand how something converts. So another one that I quite often like to use is slightly more lead generation focused, but it's looking at forms and tracking the errors of forms. Because again, that helps us to understand where those frustration points are with a form. And then you can start to, once you've got your total number of form errors, you can then see how many times it's been completed, looking at the error ratios. And by having it tracked down to a form field, that's where you can really understand where your forms are causing people a bit of frustration or where they might be dropping out.
That's an age-old problem, isn't it? Where people want to take more information up front in that form, and you're actually hurting yourself as opposed to sort of warming that lead and then asking them to give that information.
There's the basic functionality of it. It tracks whenever a form field is changed as well. So then you can get that exact funnel view of users as they flow through that form, and you can solve that question, am I asking you too much from a user at this stage? So I think it's a really nice way of looking at traditional analytics and making it a better, more informed data set that you can really start to use from and learn from as well.
Ultimately, I think you need to know what the purpose of each page is. Like the term dates example, you can't expect a high, or like multiple pages per session sort of thing. There's no reason for them to. If there is, then you might have done something wrong. You're not giving them the information. It might be outdated or something like that. But it's about, and you can easily review that performance and say this page is very top of funnel. If they're coming out and not engaging with other related content, then there might be a problem. Or it might be that they're so top of funnel, they just need that very basic thing. It's just warming them up to that topic. So it's just understanding where they are in the buyer cycle effectively, what information do they need, and then reviewing the problematic pages. If it's a service page and it's a low time on page and people are jumping and not getting in touch, then something's going wrong. That needs to be reviewed. But I know a big push at the moment is those sort of North Star metrics. I was about to say, as we've already spoken about, we've covered off our probably least favourite metrics, our favourite metrics, and now I think the not we talk about is a North Star metric, which is kind of your ultimate definition of success. So within SEO, what's probably your favourite North Star? Well, what's the North Star metric that you mostly go towards, would you say? It can be a bit of a vanity metric at times, but it is sessions that people want. That is what you want to see, that growth in visibility and that growth in traffic to your website effectively. So that's often what would be judged on, but it depends. Like also organic conversion rate and revenue for sort of e-commerce brands. It does fluctuate, but we normally sort of come back to traffic. Whether that's always our preferred route, because you can have instances where popular pages, we've got one for one client around Indian traditional food, and it's a travel company. It's not relevant to them, so you want to narrow that out. We have done, so we don't report on site-wide performance, we report on particular destinations. I think it's just being clever with what data and if it's blurred sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one with SEO as well, because occasionally you'll see people report on organic impressions. For me, organic impressions is a little bit, well, I know going back a step, but it's a little bit weak.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it before where someone will mention Argos on their page and they suddenly get loads of impressions for the keyword Argos.
Yeah.
It's when none of that impression is going to be relevant to your business. So I think sessions is a good one. As you've said, I think it helps you to plot out that growth. You can forecast it as well and tweak those numbers to see where you could be hitting when you apply conversion rates to those and understand how you are impacting onto the bottom line of what you're forecasting as well.
And in terms of impressions, I prefer that to a lot of search volume data because search volume data is historic in focus, whereas impressions, obviously the impressions within your Search Console account are also historic, but you can see, okay, this is saying it's got 300 search volume per month. We were seeing this many impressions. Obviously it fluctuates depending on the page you're on and stuff like that, but it's understanding what metrics to pay attention to. And like you were saying, with these North Star metrics, it's like that blinkered view where you're just like, this determines success for this client. We're not looking at the wider sphere, and we are. It's that check-in, that one thing that we're constantly monitoring to make sure we're on track, that then feeds wider exploration, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's no doubt that North Star metrics all have those ancillary metrics that will help towards that success point. But I think it's creating that North Star metric for the teams to focus on and really drive towards that number. I think for myself, I tend to obviously go user conversion rate, session conversion rates being either ones of my North Star metric, being in sort of data and conversion rate optimization. It's kind of doing what it says on the tin. So that's why I think those are probably my North Star metrics that I try and aim towards, is bringing those conversion rates up, converting the audience at a better rate, and having those two. Obviously, one thing that we've recently built here is a new, and plug it again, Data Studio dashboard that brings all of our North Star metrics into a singular location. So you can, for a particular client, obviously you have our top level North Star metric, but then each of the teams have that key metric to work towards. So for SEO, we'll have organic sessions, or in some cases target rankings. For paid media, we've got cost per acquisition, we've got cost per downloads. For email, click-through rates. But it's really taking lots of information and distilling it into a single location so that we've got all of those key metrics that are easy for the account directors, account managers to access and find out how the different teams are going. But it also creates that place for us as practitioners to go to and see how we're performing across all accounts into a single location.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's those discussions with the client about what's going to make the biggest impact for their business. So you need to be flexible with it. You can't always say that this metric is the best for any given client. Effectively, it will fluctuate depending on what good looks like for them.
I guess that's the flexibility around being able to adapt your metric set to the client and their objectives.
Yeah. So looping back, the key takeaways would be?
So in summary, I think probably maybe try and avoid domain rating.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Always use context around the metrics you're providing, as you may get yourself into a bit of a spin if you're not providing that context.
Yep.
And then really try and build on what the metrics are available to you in those standard platforms. Introduce custom ones, really make the most of it, and use those metrics to really make a difference to results and drive businesses forward.
Yeah.